The podcast you're about to enjoy is part of the LOWTREE Studios podcast network. To enjoy great podcasts like this one, go now to the LOWTREEstudios.com. And remember, get to the podcast.
Wreck My Podcast.
Lasers, explosion guns, and deadly carousels. Logan's Run has everything a classic sci-fi movie should have, including a braless society, which is the real future everyone was hoping for.
Wreck My Podcast.
Welcome to Wreck My Podcast, where this week we're jumping all the way back to the 70s. We don't go to the 70s very often, but we're doing it this week. I'm here with my guest. That's right, it's a husband-wife episode again. Settle in, people. I know you'll love it. She likes to touch my cracks in my face, that is. It's Madison.
It's me. Hello, everybody.
Yep, and then I'm your host, Jordan69 is my name.
Yeah, it is.
So we watched Logan's Run, which is...
That we did.
This is kind of a random pick for this show because
super random.
Yeah, we typically don't go that far back.
Yep.
It's normally like 80s is as far back as we go.
Right.
Not to mention, I had never seen this movie, so it wasn't even a nostalgia thing. I think you said you had seen it.
Yes, I was going to say the only time Push the Limits is because I'm like, remember that weird movie I watched as a kid?
Yeah, and that's kind of where we settled on this one.
Yes.
We were going between this and Dirty Dancing, which we'll probably cover Dirty Dancing in the near future because we love that movie, and it's an 80s movie, and nobody puts baby in the corner, so that's great. But we ended up watching Logan's Run, which was, I would say, a good time, but also not.
But also a waste of time?
Yeah, like it gave us a lot of stuff to talk about afterwards.
Agreed.
But also, I don't think we enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, I don't think so. I was going to say, before I start really talking, I just want to give a disclaimer that I'm recovering from being a little under the weather. So if my voice is a little scratchy, please bear with me.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, I feel like it's funny because when I told Jordan about the premise of this movie, he was like, oh, kind of like The Giver or something. And I'm like, I feel like this was a movie that was innovative at the time.
Yes.
Like, and especially for being like a sci-fi-ish movie and all that stuff. But just watching it now, I don't even think it measured up a decade ago, let alone 2 decades ago, and definitely not today.
Yeah, I think so. Here's the thing about it. I'll do the movie breakdown in a second here, and normally I do the movie breakdown right off the front, just so everyone knows kind of the plot of it if they haven't seen it in a while or never seen it.
Right.
But here's the thing: is some of the stuff looked outdated. Some of the I guess if you want to call it CGI, the effects looked outdated. Some things looked outdated. I could let that go if the story was better. And we'll talk about some problems we have with this, but there were things that didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. There were confusing moments, and there were contradictions just throughout this movie. Yeah. And I get that it's based on a book, and they had to kind of whittle a lot down to make it acceptable for
like they always
movies
do.
in the 70s.
Right.
But still, we'll get into that. So here, let me do the plot breakdown real quick where I explain this movie very, very quickly. So let's get going into this. In the 23rd century, wow, starting off strong.
Honestly, I like it.
Yeah, all right, here we go.
Oh yes, it's time for Jordan to explain the movie quickly.
In the 23rd century, a utopian society has been formed in a bubble, but the catch is that no one can live past 30 years old. For those that want to live longer than 30, they try and escape the bubble. These people are called runners. Logan, our hero, is a sandman, essentially a cop who hunts down runners and terminates them. Logan is tasked with going undercover and running to find the runner's haven called Sanctuary. Along the way, he is helped by altruistic Jessica, and they fall in love. They eventually make it out of the bubble, only to find the other escapees have been captured by a giant vacuum robot that freezes them. Luckily, Logan and Jessica are able to make it past that point and continue on to a rundown Washington, D.C. Here, they only find one man left alive and learn that Sanctuary was a lie. Logan and Jessica travel back to the city with the old man to prove to people that you can live past 30 and there's a world outside that can be populated. They effectively destroy the city in their quest to show people the truth, and the population escapes to the outside world. We learn that what we thought was a utopian society was actually dystopian. So,
dun dun dun.
This movie. Here, let me ask you the typical questions we do here on this
please
podcast,
do.
right? Have you watched this movie before?
I have.
There you go. I have not. What did you think this time around? Just, I know we're both like watching our dog right now. She's sitting on a chair like a human.
She's literally sitting at the dining room table, meal for one.
Yeah, just
serve me, you
like,
pesky
guys, bring me
humans.
my food. All right. So what did you think this time around? We kind of
Yeah. I mean, okay, so I watched this movie probably when I was like 13, because if you've heard me on the podcast ever before, I watched the weirdest things growing up. This was one of them. Even at the time, I didn't really like it.
Yeah.
But it was one of the first DVDs I had. And when I got a
Oh.
computer, I would watch this when I went to sleep. And it's a
that's-
long movie.
that's
So
random. I
I
didn't
feel
know
like
that
I
about you.
always liked that because
Ah.
like it would take me some time to go to sleep. It would just, I would have it in the background.
Yeah.
I didn't really enjoy it back then. I did not enjoy it now.
And I agree. My first viewing was not the most pleasant experience. It was pretty boring. And like I
Yeah.
said, if the writing made more sense, I think what I just was so done with this movie was like, I didn't understand whether he was actually undercover or running. And I think that's the biggest thing, is
Well-
they never really explain at what point does he go from being faking that he's a runner
Right.
to actually becoming a runner.
And somebody's probably going to roast me for this, and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was a very different level of like quote unquote acting in the 70s. I feel like the 70s, you didn't necessarily have to be a good actor. You just had to be attractive and look good on camera and
Farrah
be able
Fawcett.
to talk. But you know what I mean? I'm like, even like, you're going to hate me. Some of you are going to hate me. Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
Is anybody a really good actor in those movies?
Yes.
I don't think so. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when we think about people now, like,
Yeah.
I don't think a 70s actor would cut it at the same caliber now.
Acting back then was more chewing the scenery. It was more
That's what
Shakespearean.
I feel like it was
actor.
just very different. So
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of goes into it. Like the lines, they're just like, but what do you mean I have to do this? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so basic and lame. I'm like, you're not doing any better than I could have done. But that was just the time,
Yeah.
maybe.
Lines
Maybe
were
I'm not explaining myself
No,
well.
you are.
Do you know what I mean?
Lines were delivered in a very unorganic way.
Yes. So I feel like there was no chemistry. You
Yeah.
didn't have to have chemistry. Like, they just put people together and were like, you could be attractive and you're willing to do nude scenes. Great. You can be a
Yeah.
70s actor.
Pretty much. I mean, honestly, and again, it's got to be growing up with the times for sure.
Yeah.
That we weren't like, we had other movies besides 70s movies.
Also, I'm going to totally contradict myself
Yeah.
like I normally do. If anybody knows the movie I'm about to bring up, then like, hello, we can be best friends. Not that anybody's barking down the door to be my best friend, but
Barking down the door.
barking down my door.
All right.
I'm talking about my little puppy dog here. Okay, so Farrah Fawcett was in the original Charlie's Angels. I
Yes.
promise I'll keep this super quick.
Yes.
She was only in it for like the first season, I think. And then at the time, actors like weren't allowed to be in TV shows and movies at the same time or something like that. And she
Well, contract
left.
disputes, yeah.
Yes, she left because she wanted to pursue more serious roles and all that stuff. She was in a movie called The Burning Bed. And I think I probably told you about this.
Uh-huh.
It's about an abuse, like domestic violence, and she plays the woman who gets like beat up significantly, and like it's a heart-wrenching story, blah blah blah. At least from what I remember it making me cry a lot. And she is freaking phenomenal. Like
Yeah.
she plays this like battered wife and like is like just like the torment she goes through and all that stuff. And I don't think she won anything for it, but it was like the first time she was like really recognized for being like something other than like a beautiful body. So I know I just said that we were kind of ripping on the 70s and Farrah Fawcett, but she actually is really good in that movie.
Yeah.
So.
You know what was funny is seeing Farrah Fawcett in this movie. It just reminded me how much that the girl in the first like 2 seasons of that 70s show that plays Eric's sister looks
she is Farrah Fawcett.
Like Farrah Fawcett.
Yeah, that's what they're called. Farrah Fawcett curls. That's what that style of hair is called.
But I mean, like everything, not just
well,
like
she's skinny and blonde, and
like her face looked like her too. Like it was pretty.
I feel like that's part of the reason she was cast.
Probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely not because of her personality, because we all know
how that went down.
She was a wreck to work with. So let's talk about some things we noticed watching the movie. So classic 70s trope of nudity for nudity's sake, right? The lovers store where they go and there's like naked love zombies.
Anything.
Yeah, anything. Them, changing into the fur coats. We were cracking up. So when they go into like the ice cave and they're like, look, fur coats, we should put them on. Literally, Jessica, girl, takes all clothes off, puts fur coat on. Dude just takes shirt off.
Right.
And then when they cut to the next scene, his pants are off and he's got the fur coat on. But like, they're like, nah, people don't want to see a guy get naked. Right. But they want to see the girl get naked every time.
Let's get her get all the way nude. And even in the Love Club where they show, it's all women.
And even like, they're like, look, fur coats, we should put them on. They put them on for 2 seconds and they're like, okay, cool, we're warm. Let's put our old clothes back on now.
It literally is so freaking stupid. And Jordan and I were saying like, gosh, when they try and like justify nudity being like, it's art, it was like an artistic choice to have them be nude. I'm like, shut the front door. Nope. Like, no, it was not. You were doing this. Yeah. To do it. Like, just like you were putting Farrah Fawcett in this movie to say Farrah Fawcett was in this movie. Yeah,
she
you
gets
were
like
putting a bunch of nude
such
people
high
in.
billing in this movie, and she's in it for what, like 4 minutes?
Maybe 4 minutes. Maybe. And this is a long-ass movie.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and like 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, it's long. It's a commitment.
Yeah, it is a commitment. I thought it was funny that the bubble looks like Biodome. Like,
yes.
I was like, hey, it's Biodome. Also, miniatures were cool. Like, I don't think they were the miniature set was not that bad of the city. Granted, Star Wars was way better with their like miniatures and sets and everything, but this one didn't look half bad.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong though, isn't some of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, some of those were miniatures too, right? They built miniature sets of like Rivendell and stuff.
Oh, I don't think so. I think they used CGI for all of that.
I'm pretty sure. I remember watching behind the scenes and seeing. I don't know if they filmed on them, but they built a bunch of miniature sets.
They could have, because I mean, what was that, like 2000, 2001 when those started coming out? It was a long time. 2003. It was a long time ago. So. I
don't know if they filmed on it, but they built out all these miniature stuff. So.
I could see that Rivendell or like maybe Helm's Deep was a miniature or something.
Yes, I was going to say even like what's the city of
Gondor?
Gondor, yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
I never watched the behind the scenes stuff because I'm not that big of a nerd.
Well.
Just kidding. So another thing that we noticed here, it's a bit long, because it was smelling its own farts, is what I said. Yes. So some of the shots, and this is just classic for the time, but some of the shots ran so long, and they're like, hey, look at this cool shot we have right now.
Yeah.
What do you freaking do? I'm like, no, I don't. It doesn't age well, and it just makes it even longer for a story that could have been wrapped up in like a 40-minute movie.
Correct.
Yeah, it was way too long. I like that. So there's a thing called the carousel where they like float up, right? And they're trying to be renewed, but then they end up like exploding, and no one ever like actually got reincarnated or whatever.
Right.
But when they're going up, my first thought was, hey, it's like the Willy Wonka scene where they're like drinking the soda or whatever.
Yes.
They're like floating away. So I thought that was kind of funny. So at the beginning when they
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, was that the inspiration for the Weeknd's halftime show?
Maybe.
With the mask and the white like church robes.
He had just watched Logan's Run, and the Weeknd was like, you know what would be really cool?
I mean, it was kind of utopian, kind of.
I can see it.
I mean, I'm just joking, but
that's pretty funny. So at the beginning, when they kill their first runner, and they spray him with this like stuff that he deteriorates, then decomposes.
Spray.
But what you want to know where my mind went?
What?
Remember that movie we watched with Jack Black called like Envy or something?
Yes.
And all I thought was like the poop spray, the poop be gone. And they're like, where does it go? And it didn't actually make it disappear. It just transferred it somewhere else. I'm like, how are they decomposing matter? It has to go somewhere. So like if they kill enough runners, is their floor just literally like made up of decomposed human beings?
I was thinking in Die Monster Die, when the mom decomposes, it's like the same effect.
Yeah, it was the same effect.
Yeah.
When did Die Monster Die come out? In the 60s?
I have no idea.
We did a whole episode on it.
I don't even remember. To be fair, that was like 4 months ago.
Yeah, it was. And that's how long it feels like since we watched this movie. We watched this like a week and a half ago.
Yep.
Now doing the podcast on it finally. So the circuit, there's a thing called the circuit, right? Like Logan, he's like hanging out in his sexy robe in his like 70s plush penthouse. And he turns on this TV thing that's actually like a portal that people show up. And I guess it's like sexual partners. And like
companions.
Yeah, companions. So like when you're like, hey, I want to like sleep with someone, you go into the circuit, and then someone who's also looking to sleep with someone.
Because it's like not emotional.
Gets you. Yeah. So I was like, hey, they have Tinder.
But
also, I was like, that technically means they have the ability to transmit people.
Yes.
Like in Star Trek.
Yes.
And I'm like, why aren't they using this for, like, why are they sitting in these little pods to take them across town on this railway when you have the technology to just
because when you want to get laid, it has to be now. But if you're going to the grocery store,
no big deal.
I don't need to get there that quick.
No big deal. Yeah. Another thing that was awesome in this movie is the pixel music.
Oh. Wait, I thought you were going to say the effect in the ice place.
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. But what is actually cool about the music, and it is ridiculous, but what's cool is when they're out, and I didn't notice this, maybe you did, when they're outside the dome, it's full orchestral music.
Okay.
When they're inside the dome, it's synthetic. They use the synth and the pixel sounds.
Oh, that's funny.
It differentiates where you are in the movie.
Well, I mean, good attention to detail there.
Very cool. That makes me like it a little bit more.
Yeah, makes you feel like some part of this was planned out.
I give it a little bit of a pass then. So everyone in the future, you brought this up, is cosplaying as Peter Pan?
Yes, they all have literally the Peter Pan outfit with the tights and the shoes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, because they never grow up?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, my gosh. I think you just made the connection. That must be it.
And they all have, like, just, like, pastel-y colors
and
stuff?
the colors are what's on their hand. So they're what's called a palm flower.
Oh, I see.
In the book, it's called a palm flower. In the movie, they called it your life clock.
Right, something like. Oh, okay. I was like, I don't understand why someone.
When you're a baby, I think it's like black, and then it goes like green
to
yellow, red,
like
and red is like your last stage. So that's what they're wearing, so you can see where they are in their lifespan.
Right.
Because apparently everyone there like just stays looking the same age because there's like plastic surgery where you can keep your face looking whatever age you want and stuff like that.
Right, which plays a role in the storyline.
Yeah. So the avalanche scene is the next thing to talk about. Good Lord. Okay, this is one of those moments where I was like, this is unforgivable. Like, don't even put it in. Like, it was so bad. Essentially what it was is they were in the ice cavern, and it's supposed to be like the ice cavern is like crashing down around them.
Right.
And essentially what they did is like a Pepper's Ghost effect. Like, if you've ever been to Disneyland, you've seen the Haunted Mansion. But so they just filmed them being like, oh no, it's falling. And then overlaid a very transparent version of rocks and icicles falling.
Not realistic either.
No, it just looks awful.
Yeah.
Like literally, you can download a free app on your phone that is exponentially better effects than
Well,
this.
also, I was even thinking, I'm like, they didn't even need to use that effect.
No.
And once again, I feel like a lot of that I understand why they tried to put it in, but the whole, like, let's get in our robes, let's get out of the robes. Like, they could have just been like, oh my gosh, it's falling, and left.
Yeah.
Or, like, heard the crumble and left.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't need to be in there trying to be like, oh my gosh, it's currently falling.
Or create, like you're on a set. Literally get some foam stuff and cut it to look like it and drop it on them. Like, this was the 70s. Practical
Use
effects.
some props.
Yeah, practical effects were in full effect there.
Yeah.
So the biggest complaint we kind of talked about already for me is I never knew if Logan was undercover.
Yes.
If he was actually running. I never knew, like, where he stood in all of this. Now,
Correct.
What did you think? Because this is how I think the process went. I think that he came back and he talked to the computer, which I guess their overlord is a computer.
Correct.
Like Tron, woo. So the computer says, find Sanctuary and pretty much take it down. It's pretty much like, hey, go undercover into the runner's circle, find where the runners are going, and then report back to me, and we'll just take them all out.
Correct.
And she did that by taking 4 years off of his life.
Correct.
So that if anyone looked at him, it would look like, no, I'm aged up. Which, first off, is already kind of suspicious to me, because Jessica literally saw him, like, the day before, and he had 4 years on his life.
He does tell her. He's like, look at me. Like, I'm, like, it changed. That's how he convinces her.
But has that ever happened to anyone else? Because, like, if it's never happened to anyone else, that's suspicious. Like, oh,
yeah, but she's already suspicious of the system. That's
true. But that's almost like, it's almost like a moment where it's like, are you a cop? You got to tell me if you're a cop. Like, I just feel like, don't you feel like you're getting set up where it's like, hey, I'm a cop and I'm coming in here being like, you want some drugs, fellow children? Like,
no, because she's already part of a group that's suspicious of the system and knows they've been doing wrong by these people this whole time. So I don't feel like it would be weird for them to be messing with him and then her be like, oh no, but I trust them. They would never do this. Like, I don't think that's
okay. So that was my first hang up. Then my second hang up was where the transition was, because at the beginning I fully think he was undercover.
So this is where I think the transition is that so him and his Sandman best friend take down the first runner together, and that's where they kind of build this camaraderie that they're best friends, and like you kind of get the idea that they like confide in each other, they can trust each other with everything, and like, you know, they're the like top cops or whatever. Like they even go to the interview room together and like talk to each other on the way out, yada yada. So when he goes in, he is told alone, hey, I'm sending you on a mission. You need to go and infiltrate Sanctuary and blah, 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 you know. So he leaves and, like, nobody knows. The best friend doesn't know, the best friend cop or whatever. So he goes to Jessica because he's seen the thing on her and he's like, okay, like, look, like, I need your help. And she doesn't trust him. And he's like, look at me. Like, I don't have any time left. Like, things have changed. I don't want to die. And so she's like, okay, like, I'm going to try and help you. And so the journey begins. And I feel like when he is in... because I think the first like altercation comes when he tries to change his face at the plastic surgery place.
No, I think. Oh, you're right.
The first like big altercation, and then you know the best friend comes and kind of like tries to kill him, you know. And at this point, he's like, "Well, you know, my friend doesn't know." Like, so he's like kind of lets that one slide, but like he was really gonna undergo all this facial stuff, right? Then, as they like move to the next point, he pins his little walkie-talkie
to tell the cops.
So we know for sure, even though his best friend has shot at him, that he is still on the Sandman side.
Yes,
like he is still at the point
Yeah.
where he is like 100% gonna try and like make this happen, right? Like he is still undercover. But I think what changes between then and when him and Jessica have a little moment where she's like, I love you and I'm not going to go anywhere without you, is that him and the best friend have an altercation where like it becomes like he sees that his best friend's actually going to kill him no matter what. And I feel like at that point he's like, wow, I see what it's like on the other side of this. Like even when I'm working for the overarching like government, I'm like, this is, you're gonna kill me, like you don't trust that I'm not like gonna run. And then from that point on, he is like 100%. That being said, I don't think he ever 100% ditches the Sandman mentality, because even once they leave and get out, he wants to go back.
Yes.
And does take them back. Like, he doesn't think, oh, wow, I found out the truth. You can live past 30. Okay, well, I'm just going to stay out here. He wants to go back and, like, tell everybody and do that. So I don't think he ever 100% ditches it. But I think when he realizes his friend is going to kill him for it, he's like, all right, well, I'm done with this, because, like, maybe there really is something better out there.
Yeah.
That's
but
my
there's
opinion.
never, I think the problem is there's never
They're
a point.
not clear.
There's never a point where he clearly says, hey, yeah, I was doing this undercover.
Right.
And now I'm not doing it. I'm actually running. I'm doing it for myself. And I think their biggest problem, like, they cut a lot of scenes from this movie, which is surprising because it's so long already. And it's like, how did you cut so many scenes and you're still this long? But one of the scenes they cut, which I'm like, this is a pivotal scene that maybe you should have kept in, is when they, Jessica and Logan get out and they're swimming in the creek. Or no, not then. So there's a whole scene in the ice cavern where the robot wants to sculpt them.
Right.
And he's like, hey, you two, embrace each other and I'm going to sculpt you. And while they're embracing, this is when Logan tells Jessica that, hey, back at the cathedral, I'm the one who tipped off the Sandmen. And, like, my plan was to always, like, find the Haven and turn him in and go back. But at this point, I've changed my mind. Like, I want to run. Like, there's that type of life isn't any type of life. Like, so there was a scene where he explicitly
says, understood that there needed to be some level of communication, letting the audience know that he had changed his mind.
Yes, but then they cut it. Which they cut that scene because of it was they wanted to not be rated R. That's right. They're rated PG with as much nudity as in the 70s rated PG, but when they were naked and embracing, it was too close to simulated sex that would have put them as an R, which is why they cut the scene, not because of the spoken content, but because of the visual content. Which just
when Jordan told me that, I was like, don't even refilm it. Just have them say it in passing. Yeah. Like, in all the times that they're, like, traveling and they're just showing these, like, B-roll-esque shots of them walking together, like, you really couldn't have figured out another way for him to tell her that. It could be said in 2 sentences.
Yeah, I totally agree. So another thing I noticed in this movie was that all the inhabitants were white.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a...
white, all heterosexual.
Yeah, I want to say it's kind of like a...
no fat people.
It's almost... Like, I get that back then it was probably just being racist, but... It's almost kind of a critique on society that, like, the utopian society is just the Aryan race. It's all white people, all attractive people.
By the way, you just did the perfect... That's all, folks.
What do you mean?
You just stuttered over.
Did I stutter over myself? Didn't even notice I was doing it.
But you sounded like perfect, like Porky Pig or something.
Aryan race. So I thought that was interesting. I'm like, I don't know. Even in the 70s, you guys should have some minorities in there. Come on, what's going on? You know?
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. So my question at the end of the movie, the city is exploding and literally all the inhabitants just leave the city. Like, it's no big deal. Like, there's this big gate they can get up.
Correct.
Yet the whole movie, the premise of it is it's near impossible to get out of this city without, like, they had to go underground and do all this crazy stuff to finally make it out on the other side. I'm like, so now all of a sudden there's just a giant door that everyone's allowed out of?
Like, didn't it blow up or something?
I mean, are you saying that, like, it exploded and opened aside and the people left that way? But, like, wouldn't they have died then?
Because he, like, leads them out, and then they're, like, all up on the top, and then they surround the old man.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that the whole movie premise is that it's so hard to leave this bubble, and yet when the plot needs it's easy to leave the bubble.
I don't think it's hard to leave the bubble. I think that people don't care to leave until they're about to die, and then they're on the run, and then they're being hunted, because we do find out that there are people living on the outskirts.
That's true.
And they're not getting hunted or
in the
anything.
cathedral,
like the
they're
kid,
like living out there.
She's
and
not
everything.
getting hunted or anything.
I don't know. I just feel like it's one of those things too where I'm like, convenient.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they probably could leave at any time, but they think the outside world is like dangerous and
that's true.
uninhabitable.
It's like Snowpiercer. It's like, what are you going to do? Freeze outside?
Yeah, they don't care to try and
you have no other
out.
options. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the final thing I noticed here is that the ending was super anticlimactic.
Yeah.
And we
lame.
both came up with way better endings. So
Yep.
I think we agreed that it would have been a way cooler ending. So the way it ends now is that Jessica and Logan go back into the city and they're lying to you.
Yeah.
We can live past 30. No one gets renewed. This whole thing is pretty much euthanasia. What is that? Euthanizing. And
euthanasia.
yeah, I was like, euthanasia, which I think is technically actually a word.
No, I know.
But I think I was saying it incorrectly. They're euthanizing all of us, all this and that. They tell everyone, and then no one listens to them. They think they're crazy. And then for some reason, the town starts exploding, and then everyone leaves.
Right.
It would have been way better if the ending was kind of like that morbid ending where they go, like, you know in Soylent Green, where it's like, they're eating people. We're eating people, but no one will listen to them kind of thing. It'd be cool if they come back and they're spitting the truth.
Right.
But no one cares because their ignorance is bliss. They would much rather live in the confines of this world, not have to worry about making anything on their own, than having to have full freedom. It's like the blue pill and red pill, and they're taking the whatever the one is that stays in the Matrix.
Well, I think that too, because I'm like, you know how they say zoo animals that have been raised in the zoo, they can't be released into the wild because they don't know how to hunt or fish or anything. I'm like, it's supposed to be a happy ending, but I'm like, realistically, 90% of these people are going to die because the world technically was uninhabitable at the point they went out and there was only one guy left. Mm-hmm. But it was more but you want the freedom. That's always and they want the freedom.
Which I always say I would never pick the freedom one. I'm like, hey, if I'm having a cushy little life, I just keep my cushy little life. The thing is
interesting too is they kept saying oh, you have a mom and dad. In this utopian, it's like we said, emotionless. You have sex. If you have a baby, it's taken away from you. And then
well, not anymore. Remember they said that they're all in pods. No one has been birthed in
but
a
I'm just
womb.
saying they have this idea of oh, we're gonna oh, you could have a mom and dad. I'm like, but that's then assuming that everybody wants that, because I'm like, if they break out, just because they broke out and are in the real world doesn't mean all their ideals change and all what they're used to. I don't it's not ending, it all just I don't know.
The ending just was super anticlimactic. It didn't make sense.
Practical.
Yeah, it's not practical at all. I didn't think so.
Not that I'm expecting practical from a sci-fi movie, but I'm just saying
you want a statement at least.
I want something to be there's a reason this was a better choice.
Yeah. The sequel to Logan's Run is probably awful. Which
it's probably just even more naked people.
Well, there's book sequels. I don't think there ever was a movie sequel, but
who knows?
I think that they were. Oh, we'll get to that later. I think I wrote it down. Did it wreck your 70s?
I mean, yes.
Yeah, I think it wrecked mine too.
Yeah.
Especially since 1 year later, Star Wars came out. I mean, come on.
That's pretty crazy.
1 year later.
Yeah.
One freaking year later.
But that was when you told me that the original, quote unquote, original Fantastic Four came out the same year as Batman Begins.
I know, right?
That is crazy.
The gap between is huge. So let me tell you a little bit of info about this movie. Just like info you can find at wreckmypodcast.com. That's right. You can find our Redbubble store, our Amazon link, our Patreon link, and all the videos and audio and Instagram, all right there, wreckmypodcast.com. Go check it out. So this movie came out June 23rd, 1976. Summer blockbuster. I think this was still before Blockbuster. When did Jaws come out? That was the first blockbuster.
I don't know.
I think it came out a year later, maybe a year earlier, sometime in the 70s. Anyway, this movie was based on a book from 1967, also called Logan's Run. The only two plot points from the book that actually stayed in the movie was the idea that everyone must die at a set age.
Okay.
The age was different.
Okay.
And that Logan and Jessica run away chased by Francis. Those are the only two things that from the book that made it into the movie. That wasn't just the basic premise of a town.
Right.
But it was a different century. It was a different kind of town.
Interesting.
All the plot points were different. Everything was completely different. So this made box office stuff's a little hard back then, but it made an estimated $9 million at the box office, which I think was good for the time.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was pretty good for a 70s sci-fi film, So a lot of filming in Dallas and Fort Worth, which is kind of cool because we now live in the DFW area.
Look at that.
So there's a place called the Water Gardens in Fort Worth, which is that at the end, the waterfallish looking thing that they're on. That's there. So we could actually go check it out there. The gym that they're in, the Sandman gym, where he's like chilling in the pool and they're doing flips and do's, is in Arlington, which is not too far. The apartment buildings that they live in is in Dallas. And the reason why a lot of the people in the background are just like blonde bombshells, both men and women, is because it's a lot of extras from Dallas.
That's funny.
So
well, there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. And then they also filmed the swimming scene in Calabasas. So a little bit from where we used to live, a little bit from where we live now.
It was meant to be that we review this movie.
Pretty cool. It got a 62% critic score, 67% audience score.
Okay.
Not failing, but pretty low down there.
Which is fair.
Yeah, I agree. This was directed by Michael Anderson. He also directed The New Adventures of Pinocchio in the 90s, which is just like a fear-inducing movie.
Jeez.
He directed Around the World in 80 Days, both the 50s version and the 90s version that had Jackie Chan in it.
What?
He directed both of them. This dude had to be old when he did that last one.
How old was this guy?
Yeah. So this movie is starring Michael York as Logan 5, Logan 6, Logan 5.
He's 5.
Michael York, you may know better as Basil from Austin Powers.
That's what.
Twins, Basil.
Love him.
And a bunch of other stuff too. But I mean, that's who our generation only knows Michael York as that. We have Richard Jordan played Francis. And I wanted to mention him because he was in Hunt for Red October, which is another pretty big movie, and Dune, which they're redoing Dune this year. And Dune came out in like the 80s, and he was in that. We have Jenny Agutter, who played Jessica. She was in American Werewolf in London, which I've never seen that movie.
Never seen that.
But one movie we have seen she's in, Child's Play 2.
She's like the...
I think she's the like main girl in it.
We watched that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the same girl. Mm-hmm.
She's not the daughter.
No, she's one of the friends in a scene, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, she can't be the main girl.
Yeah, I don't think she's the main girl, but I think she was one of like the tertiary characters that had a little bit of stuff to do in it. We have Farrah Fawcett, as we said, show up as Holly.
Ooh,
Charlie's Angels, talked all about her. Jerry Goldsmith did the music. Now, I wanted to mention Jerry Goldsmith because he's done music on a lot of things I'm a fan of. And some of those are Soarin' Around the World at Disney World and Disneyland.
Well, there you go.
A bunch of Star Trek movies and the Voyager TV show, which I'm a huge fan of. And it looks like he's credited for making the Universal logo theme.
What?
Yeah. Like, he created that.
Wow.
Because almost every credit was Universal logo theme for this movie. Like, he has like 5 bajillion credits because they're all the Universal logos seen. All right, so moving on to some fun facts.
Fun facts. Please redeem it.
Oh, I will maybe redeem a little bit of it.
What is facts? Baby, they're fun. They're fun. Oh, yeah. What is facts? Baby, they're fun. They're fun. Oh, yeah.
So they were going to add Richard Nixon to the portraits of presidents in the Capitol. And they were going to have the old man say something about his name was Tricky something, or because his nickname was Tricky Dicky. But it was considered too controversial at the time for the film.
Oh, gosh.
Because, Watergate.
Sure.
So this movie was rated PG, like I said, even though the love shop sequence was cut down to keep that PG rating. So it was even longer.
I mean, they literally had like 17 naked women just flailing around.
It was literally like The Walking Dead with attractive naked people.
That was I mean, it wasn't as bright, but that was the equivalent to the opening of Carrie.
Yeah. Kind of.
in the 70s, they just wanted a bunch of pubes and like boobs.
Bush.
Don't understand.
And then a girl getting a period in the shower because
That was not
what's
in this
better
one.
to start your movie than having Sissy Spacek having a period in the shower?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
The book had the residents being killed at 21, but they changed it to 30 because they thought it was too unrealistic to have a cast that young. Which
which makes sense.
There's so like back then. The actors who were of age were not that great. Where now, like, you can get children actors that are just amazing. I mean, look at it.
I mean, he specifically, I kind of was even having a hard time believing he was supposed to be 30.
Oh, they were all over 30.
No, I know.
The whole main cast is
I thought
over 30.
she looked young, but I didn't think he looked. Also,
she might have been
This
younger.
is at the time when, what's her name? Olivia Newton-John was 29 when she was cast to play 17-year-old Sandra Dee in Grease.
Yeah, what's the dude, the super old dude? And he's part of Grease Lightning, the Thunderbirds.
The guy who plays Kaneki?
Yeah, Kaneki, the one who's like...
he's in Taxi.
He looks like he's 48.
Yeah, no, they're all like, we're like in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah, it's so funny. You're right. This was the same time period where you could just get away with that. So, talking about the water garden in Fort Worth, I was saying, hey, we could go check it out. Well, it's a little bit less fun than it was back then because in 2004, 4 people drowned.
Oh, no.
You used to be able to swim in those pool areas. Actually go in like the water, but then 4 people drowned in 2004, so they closed it.
4?
4 people.
How did all 4?
I have no idea, but
that's awful.
They closed it for 3 years, and then they reopened in 2007, but they changed the depth to only 2 feet. So you can still go in the pool, but it's only 2 feet deep now.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they got like caught under something, or I have no idea. But yeah, I saw that.
So it wasn't like 4 people throughout. It was like 4 people in a day.
I think it was 4 people at one time.
Jeez,
it happened
that's awful.
to. Yeah. So using math, because math is fun. Someone figured out that the population of the city is about 400,000 people.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool. About 400,000 people there. That's a good size city.
What numbers were they crunching?
Beats me, but how factual could this be too? It's like an IMDb
Although,
trivia thing.
let me tell you, we're like giving them a hard time. Jordan and I did the math the other day to find out how many people Barney slept with and How I Met Your Mother. So I guess we cannot judge.
We
too
learned
much.
that Barney isn't much of a sleazebag as we thought because over 6 years, I think we said, he slept with 200 people, which is like less than a person a week.
Yeah, I think when we ended up crunching the exact numbers, it was like 1.5 per people per week.
Was that what it was? Because I thought it was 6 or maybe it was 4 years divided by 200. Yeah, 52.
I don't have the numbers, but we were able to crunch the numbers.
Yeah. It
wasn't very much, actually.
We have a stellar life.
I wish you did not say that so sarcastically.
We do. Just sometimes we do weird things like that.
Yes.
So in the book, the carousel doesn't exist.
Okay.
So in the book, people go to what's called a sleep shot, where they are killed with a pleasure-inducing gas.
Jeez.
Yeah, so a little bit different there, which reminds me of Barbarella, where the dude tries to kill her with like his pleasure organ or whatever. Like, it's so weird.
His pleasure organ?
Yeah, that's right. In the movie Barbarella with Jane Fonda, there's a guy who tries to kill Jane Fonda by putting her what's in a pleasure organ, where he plays the organ and she's attached to it, and it gives her so many orgasms that it kills her.
That is not real.
She is such a sexual deviant that it can't actually kill her. It breaks the machine because the orgasms don't kill her.
I literally always tell Jordan, I just want to be in the board meetings for these movies or like these concepts. Like, can you imagine pitching?
So there's a giant organ, right? And it gives you orgasms.
Like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, I love it. So in the frozen cavern, those frozen people you see are actually actors who were spray painted white and just stood very still during filming.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I guess that was cheaper than just making dummies or something. But
interesting. Again, all nude. Go figure.
All nude. The girl who touches the old man's face at the end there, her name is Ashley Cox. And they mentioned her in the trivia because apparently she became a Playboy model later. So there you go.
I'm surprised not all of these people were Playboy models. They all had banging bodies and were totally good with nudity.
They may have been. That's the only one that got mentioned, though.
I don't know.
So it was very uncommon at the time to portray homosexuality as a possibility, and even more so as an accepted thing.
Sure.
So because only only 3 years before this, I'm shocked. So 77, only 3 years before this, homosexuality was still considered a mental disorder.
Yes, I was going to say it was still in the DSM-5 or whatever.
Yeah, so that's crazy to me. But this movie kind of portrayed homosexuality because the dude showed up on the circuit, and it was supposed to be portrayed that Logan considered it and was like, not today.
Yeah, he was like, I'm not into it.
But like that normally would be something he would pick.
Yeah, well, the thing that I was thinking more about the circuit was that I didn't think that it was like a sex pod. I thought it was more like a companion pod.
No, I think it's supposed to be they just bang one out and then they're like, all right, see ya.
Okay.
It's
I thought that it was like a companion pod and then he like really liked her.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like, so in the TV show Upload that came out a year or two ago, there's an app that's literally just like a bang one out app. Like pretty much, you know how dating apps, there's certain ones where it's like you go on this one to actually date. You go on this one for a hookup. It's like there's one where they're not being coy about it. They're just like, no, literally, like show up, bang it out, you give them a star rating.
The only
and then
reason that I thought it was solely a companion one is because the friend shows up with 2 girls and he was like expecting the friend to show up. So I thought he was like killing time until his friend was showing up with his date, and so he was hanging out with people. I think
he was going to kill time having sex with someone random because he showed up with drugs. Because remember, he smashes the the smoke that makes you high. So I think that's maybe what it was.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. Where was I? Right here. So in the book, Sanctuary ends up being an abandoned space station, and Logan and Jessica escape to it in a rocket, which I kind of understand why they were like changing a lot of this.
Yeah.
Because like in the 70s, although again, 1 year later, Star Wars, but they were probably like, space may be a little too hard to get.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's kind of funny. The movie was considered fairly successful for a sci-fi film in the 70s, but then, like I said, Star Wars came out 1 year later.
Changed everything.
And changed the game. Made so many waves, and I love it. The doctor in the room where you change your face, that's the director's son.
Nepotism at its finest.
Yeah, I think he was actually he was an actor who had a lot of roles.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of nice. His dad was like, hey, I got this like small role, you want to be in it and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. The Love Shop sequence was filmed in a club in Dallas that no longer exists. It was in a building that got demolished in the early 2000s. But yeah, it was
the Sportatorium?
No, not the Sportatorium, which, rest in peace, Sportatorium.
Yes.
But yeah, apparently that club was like world famous in Dallas for like 2 decades.
Interesting.
So
they like to tear down some pretty big monuments.
Dallas ain't got time for that. So they tried to shoot a reboot of this movie in 1997 with Leonardo DiCaprio playing Logan.
I heard that.
Yeah, but it never... So it was in development for like 15 years before they finally pulled the plug on it.
Like starting in 97?
Starting in 97. And like rumors were flying around for at least a decade about it.
I remember even hearing about that, yeah.
Even recently, they just announced, I think, that they were talking about making a TV show reboot of Logan's Run. Because they did make a TV show of Logan's Run 1 year after this came out.
Because I feel like people love the concept. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't like done all the way.
No, I think you could do a really cool thing with it right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Although I would argue that The Island is like a soft reboot of Logan's Run.
Well, there's been a lot of spins on the same idea, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, but a straight Logan's Run reboot, I'd be all for, honestly, because I think the story has the bones.
Yeah.
You just got to build on it.
Yeah.
And then let's see here, the face shop scene where the laser starts going crazy and cutting people up. You remember Die Another Day, 007 Die Another Day?
Of course.
Remember, there's a scene that is essentially this scene in that movie. Remember when he's strapped on the thing, and then the lasers start going crazy and they cut off the guy's arm to get through the door and stuff? That scene was ripped off from this movie, and they've admitted to it that like we just ripped it off from Logan's Run.
Well, I mean, anything with lasers and like that makes sense. And also, wasn't that like a plastic surgery element to that one too?
Yes,
didn't he like get the new face?
The dude got the new face. You're right. It was.
Yeah.
He's like, it's extremely painful and stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
So that whole thing was just ripped from Logan's Run. That's so awesome. I love it. And then finally, there was a scene that was cut to keep it from being R-rated. Oh, I already talked about this. The ice
sculpture scene.
Yeah, so I already talked about that. And
which I don't think
simulated sex.
It's worth talking about, which I understand why you didn't include it originally. But the ice sculpture scene we keep referring to, pretty much, is that once they make it through the sewage system and they're like, think that they've made it to this like, sanctuary because they've only heard about it.
Yeah.
They don't even know what they're looking for. So it's like ice cold, and they they see the fur, they put the fur on. That's when we would have this like funny nude scene, and then this robot comes out.
Yeah, awful looking robot,
and pretty much is like, yeah, like sit down, like you've made it, like let me get you food, and like we're gonna take care of you. And they're like, great. And then, you know, they get a suspicion something's off. The robot's kind of repeating itself. And then it turns into a killer robot. And you find out that every other person that's tried to run so far, he's been able to, like, quote unquote, beat them and, like, preserve them in this ice sculpture. Like, he's, like, the final boss before you get out there. And I'm like, I feel like I understand the concept because you do. If you built a utopia that you didn't want people to run out of, you would put this final like boss in place.
Yeah.
To like be the final like barrier to keep them.
Yeah.
But it was so poorly executed.
Yeah, that's another thing I was so confused about.
I'm like,
why
again,
is this guy
I
here?
loved the idea. I love the idea of Logan's Run. I love a lot of the things that they did. But it was the way they did it. It just did not work. And I feel like, I mean, if you don't want the podcast to get too long, we don't have to.
No,
but I
keep
feel
going.
like we should share what we thought the ending should have been.
Didn't we kind of say what we thought the ending should have been about them going back in and saying, hey,
No, that's what happened. They did go back in and say, hey.
But then
We were saying if it was like a more like, you know, psychological thriller ending,
Okay.
it would be that they... But I'm saying, like, what do you think, like, this actual movie ending should have been? Do you remember what we were talking about?
Kind of. Well, I was going to mention real quick before we get to the ending, that robot scene, like you said, was a great idea. But it's another one of those points where I'm like, it makes no sense. That could have easily been explained away in 2 seconds of exposition.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem with this movie is that, like you said, I could understand that maybe someone creating this society would want to put a barrier in place. That's it. Everything that we are gleaning from this movie... we are like assuming.
Yes,
none of
correct.
it is given
correct.
to you. You're assuming it. And I'm like, that's cool to a certain point, but at some point you need to start giving me concrete details here about like why are the people out there like there's only one person out there anymore. Why is this robot here? Why is this happening? Why is there a computer that rules the whole thing? You know, like
they don't really
So what was the ending we were talking about? Because I honestly don't remember.
I was going to say, I'm not saying it had to be this, that it would have been any better. But what I remember happening, which I think would have been way cooler, is that, so what actually happens is like the whole like trajectory of the plot starts when the computer moves his timeline up, right? And one thing that doesn't make sense, which is why it would have made so much more sense, is that when he first kills the runner, him and his partner, right? He collects the runner's stuff.
Yes.
And one of it is the symbol for sanctuary.
Yeah, which is like, I think it's called an Ankh.
Something like that.
A-N-K-H. It's the bottom of a cross with a lasso on top.
Yes. And so when the friend goes into the computer before he does, we see the friend place down his personal items and then put his palm on the like screen for the computer to read. And then it's like, Francis, like sit down. And then like he goes and does it. So when Logan goes and puts all of his stuff on and puts his palm on, we see that he puts all of the runner's stuff on instead of his own personal stuff. We see the little sanctuary thing on there. So in my head, I remember it being like the computer took that to be his belongings and was like a case of mistaken identity.
Yes.
And then it puts his like flashing thing on his palm up because the guy was running because he was running out of time. So now Logan is running out of time. Like it's like a case of mistaken identity.
Yes.
And because Logan doesn't want to have to go in to renew, he befriends Jessica and then they start running together.
Yes. So that's
okay.
What it
So
should
I
have been.
wish that was what it happened because it makes a lot more sense. And I feel like the whole idea of him working undercover like doesn't change the fact that the friend would have followed him. Like you could have had all the same plot points.
Yeah.
I feel like it, if anything, would have made Logan even more relatable because he finally got to see what it was like to be hunted and like all that stuff. In the movie, also, when they go out to Sanctuary, like I said, I would have kept that final boss, like, of the ice robot and stuff. I think that's really cool. But when they go out, they, like, go through, like, just like endless B-roll footage of them like
boring.
trying to go through. And then when they do get to finally, they just see one guy.
Yeah.
Okay. And they are in a building with one guy. And then they're like, is there anybody else? And he's like, no. They never look.
Yeah.
They never go like anything. They never talk about like the idea that sanctuary is just the idea of freedom or like anything. They make it seem like, oh no, it was still a physical place that just wasn't here. Like they don't talk about any of that. And then they end up going back and saving people. I'm like, I feel like they should have either not had anybody been out there and them have a deep revelation of like, well, do we go back or is sanctuary freedom?
Or they're the new Adam and Eve.
Or they're the new Adam and Eve and now they're going to create sanctuary and like nobody else made it to this point, but sanctuary is real because they're going to make it real.
Yeah.
Or something. I just feel like it was like, oh, here's this one person. We're not going to keep looking. Like, we trust you.
Well, he has a lot of cats. He's trustworthy.
Yeah, let me bring you back, and then we're going to destroy this, and then, like, we're going to go... Like, it just didn't seem to make any sense. And it was funny because when they beat, like, the little ice robot guy... We were like, there's still 40 minutes of this movie. How is that possible? It's because it takes them that long to go through all the B-roll, find the person, go back, destroy it, and then go back.
Conversations with the old man.
Oh my gosh, it's so dumb. So I'm like, look, we gotta like either move it along or do something because this was too much.
What is
but
this,
I'm
Gone
like,
with the Wind?
I feel like those are the. Hey, Gone with the Wind is amazing. I feel like those are the two things I would change. Like the trajectory of why the plot was moving forward and then also what the idea of sanctuary is.
I agree with that.
I feel like should have been changed.
I totally agree with that. One last fun fact I forgot to write down is that the dude who plays the old man out in Washington, D.C., he pretty much improv'd all of his lines. Him being a senile old man, kind of. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. How fun is that? I agree with you. I think that there could have been a lot changed to make this movie spectacular rather than just okay.
Yeah.
And maybe one day they'll get to it, but we'll see. I don't know. Sometimes reboots are good. Sometimes they're even worse than the original. So
yeah, I agree.
We'll see what happens. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Go check out our area that you can give us a rating or a review, because if you give us a review, we will send you a sticker. That's right. We're the only podcast in the world that will give you a free sticker for a review. No other podcasts do this except for us. One and only. So get a sticker from us. Other than that, thank you for listening. Hopefully some people found enjoyment out of this one. It's kind of a niche episode because it's not our generation, which is typically who we target is people in our generation. So hopefully the numbers aren't like 4 listens this week on this one. But I had fun doing this. I had fun looking things up. I had fun hanging out with you. So thank you, Madison, for being here. I appreciate it. And we love our listeners because who else do we get wrecked with but them? All right, bye.
Bye.
Wreck My Podcast. Wreck My Podcast.
Just imagine a world where you will hold your entire future in the palm of your hand, when a tiny glowing crystal will guide you through an existence in which each day is more wonderful than the last, where it will be possible for you to obtain the fulfillment of every fantasy, the satisfaction of every vanity, the absolute attainment of every wish.
Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer presents the Saul David production of Logan's Run. A fantastic journey through a world beyond imagination. Welcome to the 23rd century. The perfect world of total pleasure. Imagine a world in which you need never be alone. You touch a switch, turn a dial, and the perfect lover steps into your arms. Every pleasure is yours to experience.
Runner.
There's just one catch.
When the tiny crystal in the palm of your hand flashes its final message, your time is up. Michael York is Logan.
Run, Logan!
Policeman in a perfect world.
No!
Trained to track down runners.
Run, Logan!
Until he is forced to run himself.
Run, Logan!
runner.
Logan! I'm your friend, I understand. We all go crazy once in a while. But she's a runner, and it's over.
Overwhelming, am I not?
Box, an incredible being. More than human, more than machine. Diabolical guardian of the gateway to freedom. For Logan and the woman who loves him.
Logan 5, Logan 5, Logan 5, Logan 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5,
Terminator.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5, now.
I've never seen a face like that before. That must be the look of being old.
MGM takes you into a new age of adventure in the first motion picture of the 23rd century. Logan's Run. It begins where imagination ends.
Man, it's been so long since we watched this movie.
I know.
Do you even remember what happened?
Yes, I do.
All right, here, let me
They had sex in a pond.
They did. And they went through a sex shop.
A sex shop?
You remember? They had that scene where they walked through like the sex store or whatever, where everyone was naked and we were
Oh, that
like,
wasn't a sex store.
Yeah,
that was like a strip club.
It was called the sex store.
I thought it was called the love store.
Oh, maybe it was the love store.
Yeah, it was the love store.
It was something about a store. They weren't selling anything, though.
They were giving it away for free.
All right, let me do this intro. Lasers, exploding guns, deadly carousels. Logan's Run has everything a classic 70s sci-fi movie should have, including... Oh, hang on. That was bad. It's hard for me to read this. There we go.
You want me to do it?
Nope.
Hashtag free the nipple.
Free the tatas. All right.
Wreck my podcast.